Hi, this is Kara. Welcome to Breaking Free Fridays, or welcome back if you've been following the series. It's so great to have you here. And what a beautiful summer day this is. I just felt guided to talk about judgment and self-judgment and some of the concepts related to this and how they have incredible keys for unlocking greater levels of empowerment and just breaking free of the limitations, free of things that hold us back. So, it's in our nature to categorize things, to make impressions of things, to assess things. Our brain is wired in so many ways to keep us safe, and in its primal operations in doing that, a lot of these judgments, go into these different categories, and they end up connecting to things that are tied to our wounding in the past. And oftentimes these sources of wounding, they are created from a place of almost a misunderstanding. And I have been through my share of abuse, so I'm not minimizing, the experiences that people have that can be incredibly harsh. And at the same time, even in those settings where there's the healthiest of dynamics, we're all human, and we all have things that that are roots of different woundings or limiting beliefs, things that come up, core issues, things like I'm not good enough, or fear of failure, or fear of not being good enough, fear of not being lovable, or being unwanted, things like that can kind of drive things in a subconscious manner, behind the scenes. Sometimes we don't even know it's happening until we realize, and then we wake up, and there's all sorts of opportunity that comes forward in that discovery process. So one of the reasons that I share this context is because this wounding, this actually can create these roots to being activated or triggered by certain interactions, certain tones, certain things that other people say. And one of the things that I invite you to recognize and kind of open the lens on in terms of perspective is the idea that things that we may take as criticism or judgments against us, or even things that we may be defensive of, that those are actually an invitation to look inward, that it's not even really about the other person at all. In fact, the more we come into center and wholeness and that really strong relationship with self, and that place of incredible strength in our self-esteem and embracing and embodying our divinity, the more that we actually have this beautiful opportunity to shine our light, and instead of being affected by someone else's possible rejection or actual rejection, the more we realize that is actually their business, and it's not even really about us. And oftentimes it takes a lot of inner work to get to that place where we can just be really solid in our own acceptance of ourselves and our own groundedness, our own centeredness, that we just hold space for other people wherever they are and wherever they're showing up. One of the other places that this concept around judgment comes up, which is really interesting, has to do also with our own self-judgment. Oftentimes, when we are really affected by somebody else, either something they say, or something that they're doing, or an interaction or something like that, it is a beautiful opportunity to look back inwards and see where we're actually judging ourselves or where we've rejected our own self, a part of us. One of the things to keep in mind is that in truth, we are all things. There's a spectrum of everything, and in our oneness and in our connectedness at a higher level of consciousness and in that spiritual level of being, we are all things, we hold all things. And so when we feel that self-judgment coming really strongly, it is an opportunity to look inwards and say, where am I rejecting myself? And oftentimes it comes back to something deep in childhood, where there's inner child healing that can take place, and integration, where we accept that part of us. For example, I'll share something personal with me. Because of the dynamics that I grew up in, with an alcoholic father and the codependent cycle and all of that, addiction, codependency with my parents, I became a young adult. I was like a mini adult by the time I was 5. And so even though there were lots of moments throughout my childhood where I experienced beautiful childlike moments and memories and experiences, at the same time, I also had a lot of responsibility. I took on a lot of responsibility at a very young age. And so I didn't, even as a teenager, I didn't really actually behave like a typical teen. I was really more of that like overly responsible adult. And in doing that, it was almost like a coping mechanism, survival behaviors and things that really got me through, some of the harder parts of what I was experiencing. But in doing that, I also alienated and rejected and pushed down a very important piece of who I was as a being, who I am as a being. And so in my journey, in really coming back to that place of wholeness, there was an opportunity for me to really integrate that piece of me that I had rejected so long ago. And when we reject those parts, the wisdom that is so brilliant in our divine nature, it's basically communicating to us and letting us know that is there for us to integrate and recognize. And it does that by these triggers and by things that we get activated or really emotionally charged on. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where either you're judging yourself, and we can tell this a lot of times by if we're beating ourselves up, if we're really harsh and hard on ourselves, because we deserve compassion and grace too. And in interactions with others, if you find yourself being really defensive or really emotionally charged or really triggered, either even within your own self or extreme like irritation with the other person, it's another invitation to really look inward. We all have our own responsibility. So this is this beautiful invitation for radical awareness, radical responsibility, and accountability, because our greatest source of empowerment and freedom and continual, breaking free of limitations is really within. It's coming back to ourselves and recognizing where we have actually given our power away. When we see someone else as a source of blame or a situation as a source of blame, as opposed to where we can identify the opportunity within us to embrace our wholeness, to embrace our divinity, our connection to God, to spirit, to higher consciousness, however you resonate with that, however you define that. When we embrace that, oh my gosh, it's such a game changer. So much starts to become possible in that alignment. Remember, this is not about beating ourselves up. It is not at all. It's about letting go of the stuff that we have piled on over our experiences, over our years, that have been really harsh experiences that we've actually walled ourselves inside of in a way to protect ourselves, but it's actually created an imprisoned environment where we've trapped ourselves. So this is about letting go. It's about dissolving that stuff and coming back into our true nature, into our wholeness, and into our alignment. And one of the other things, just as a little tidbit to leave, as you might be reflecting on some of the things that have happened in your past, where you're trying to learn from them, or doing a healing exercise and alchemizing something and moving forward. When you think about times that you have felt hurt, remember that when someone else is interacting with us and they're coming from a place of anger that is intense, or a place of shame, or a place of toxic guilt, or a place of any number of lower frequency places where somebody might actually be communicating from, interacting from, that is not their true nature. That is them in more of a triggered state, in a limited state. And keep in mind that oftentimes when people are in their own limitations, and out of their own fear, they can think that they are being so loving and trying to protect us, and it just doesn't come across that way. And so that's where, going back to that piece of like radical responsibility and accountability and opportunity, really opportunity, right? That's where we get to say, oh my goodness, this wasn't really meant in the way that I took it. And free yourself. And there's so many things, so many ways that we can let go and that we can release. But I always encourage you to really go back to your heart, where you're centering back into your body, into your breath, stilling your mind. There's one technique that I'll leave with you before I close out for tonight, that I love to do, because so much of these limitations come from the monkey mind, and like the racing and the worry and that spiraling that we can get caught up in our mind. So I like to do this laying down. And after you've put a hand on your heart and the other hand on your belly, and you've taken some really deep breaths, and you've allowed yourself to come to more of a place of calm, you felt yourself connecting to God, to spirit, to your highest self, and actually imagine like a spigot on the back of your head, where it's just like you open it up and you just let anything that doesn't serve you, you just let it go. You just release it. You let it go, and let Gaia take it, or you can ask God to transform it, and you just release it and know that you're making space to bring in the beauty of the light and the highest frequency of energies, things that are aligned with peace, with love, with courage, with joy, with bliss, with happiness, and really centering yourself in that connectedness to your own highest self, to your sacred temple, to God. And gosh, I am wishing you a beautiful week. And I just would love to hear any feedback that you have. If you found this helpful, please share it with friends and family, send a like, and subscribe. And I hope you have a wonderful week. And here's to your next level of empowerment and breaking free. Bye for now.